In this video, we're going to take a look at what a return type function is. So up until now, you've been working with void functions, which run top to bottom, and then they don't return anything. Well, a return type function is kind of where you assign the whole function to a variable, like a string or an integer or something like that, and then it returns some information back to you when you call that method. We'll get into a couple examples because I know it sounds confusing at first, but we'll get into a couple examples so you can see what that looks like. So let's go ahead and hop into Unity real quick, and let me empty out our previous script. So the simplest kind of return type method is, let's say, where we want to add two numbers together, right? Let's say that those numbers are integers. So instead of saying like void add two numbers, we would assign it to the variable type that we want to return. So in this case, we're adding two integers together. So we want to return an integer. So this becomes int add two numbers. And then it's underlined in red because it's now a return type function and we haven't returned anything yet. So within our parameters, let's go ahead and take an integer a and integer b. And here we can say like integer sum equals a plus b. And then all we need to do is return the sum. And now in start, if I called this method add two numbers and then passed in, let's say like 5 and 10, this method right here is going to return 15. So what I can do is we could wrap this in a debug.log. Debug.log add two numbers. And if we hit save and hop into Unity, this is just going to print out 15, since this is running from top to bottom and then returning the sum of a plus b. And there you go. In our console, it's just printing out the number 15. So that's like the bare bones basic example of what a return type function is. But let's go ahead and do a slightly more game-oriented return type function. Let's go ahead and bring back the example from the earlier one where we're checking to see if we have enough gems to open up the dungeon. So let's bring back our void open dungeon. And in that one, we had an integer for our like current gems, and we had an integer for the gems that were needed, right? Gems required. And if our current gems were greater than or equal to the gems required, they open the dungeon, right? And else, if it wasn't, then in our previous one, we calculated it in here. We calculated like the gems needed, and that equaled our gems required minus our current gems. And then we also did a debug.log that said you still need this many gems, right? So let's convert this to using a return type function instead. Since our gems needed is an integer, we could create an int method since all of our gems are ints. And let's call that like calculate gems needed. And remember, it's underlined in red because we're currently not returning anything, so the conditions are not satisfied yet for this method. And let's take in a couple parameters. Let's take in the current number of gems we have, and let's take in the required gems. And then in here, we can calculate that, right? So we can calculate int gems needed, and that it's just very similar to how we did it before. That equals our required gems minus our current gems. And then all we're going to do is return gems needed. Now that we have this return type method, we can get rid of this calculation here. And right here, instead of using this variable, we can just call the method, calculate gems needed. So we can just calculate it right here in line in our dialog. We can say you still need plus this return method, calculate gems needed, passing in our current gems and our required gems, and it should work the same as before, but it's a little bit easier for us to read what's going on. Let's go ahead and in start, let's call our method open dungeon, and let's make it so that we don't have enough gems, right? So we have 23 gems, but we need 25. So our return type method should calculate 2, and our message should say, you still need 2 gems. So let's save this and hop into Unity and test it out. And there it is. I need to do a little bit of spacing, but it says you still need 2 more gems. Perfect. So that's the power of return type functions. You can use functions to return data to you. Now that you have an overview of return type functions and custom methods, in the next video, we're going to take a look at some challenges that use all that information. So see you in the next one.